Nexus Station was the biggest space station in the galaxy. It floated in empty space between 3 star systems, and ships came here from everywhere. The station was so huge that it had its own weather inside. Different alien races walked through the metal corridors every day. Some had 4 arms, some had wings, and others looked like walking trees. Do-hyun was 17 years old and very far from Earth. He was here to study aliens for school. Every morning he walked through the busy markets to get to the research center. The air smelled like strange spices and machine oil. Alien voices spoke in languages he didn't understand. On his 3rd week at the station, Do-hyun saw her. An old alien woman sat alone near the garbage bins behind the food stalls. Her skin was gray and wrinkled, but Do-hyun could see faint blue patterns under the surface. She wore torn purple robes that might have been beautiful once. Most aliens walked past her quickly, looking away. The woman was talking to herself. Do-hyun couldn't understand her words, but her voice sounded sad and tired. She held a small metal object in her hands, turning it over and over like it was precious. "Don't stare at the crazy one," said Kale, a blue-skinned alien who worked at the research center. "She's been here for months. Security tries to move her, but she always comes back." Do-hyun watched the old woman for a moment longer. Something about her reminded him of his grandmother back on Earth. "What's wrong with her?" "She talks about old stories that make no sense. Star maps and sleeping watchers, things like that. The doctors say her mind is broken." Kyle grabbed Do-hyun's arm. "Come on, we'll be late." But Do-hyun kept thinking about the old woman during his classes. When lunchtime came, he bought extra food from the cafeteria. Instead of eating with the other students, he walked back to where she sat. The woman looked up when he approached. Her eyes were completely black, but they seemed kind. Do-hyun held out the food package. "Are you hungry?" he asked in basic Galactic, the simple language most aliens understood. The woman stared at him for a long time. Then she smiled, showing teeth that glowed softly in the dim light. She took the food with shaking hands. "Thank you, small human," she said. Her voice was musical even though she spoke slowly. "It has been many days since someone was kind to me." Do-hyun sat down on the ground next to her. The floor was dirty and cold, but he didn't mind. "What's your name?" "I am Valara of the Nethys people." She opened the food package carefully. "But the Nethys are gone now." "I am the last. I'm Do-hyun. I'm from Earth." Valara nodded as she ate. "Earth, yes, I know of your world. Young species, but strong. You humans are different from the others, but different how? You listen when others do not. You care when others walk away." She touched the metal object she carried. "This is important in the dark times that come." Do-hyun didn't understand what she meant, but something in her voice made him want to know more. "Dark times?" But Valara had closed her eyes and was rocking back and forth slightly. She began to speak in her own language, words that sounded like music mixed with starlight. The next day, Do-hyun brought food again. And the day after that. "You're wasting your time," said Ji-won, another human student. The medical team checked her. "She's senile. Her brain is damaged." "She doesn't seem damaged to me," Do-hyun said. "Just sad. Sad about made-up things. She talks about ancient wars that never happened." But Do-hyun kept visiting Valara. Every day she seemed a little more willing to talk. She told him about her homeworld, a place of crystal cities and singing waters. She spoke of her people, who could make light dance in their hands and read the songs of stars. "We were guardians once," she said on his 10th visit. "We watched the edges of the galaxy where the hungry darkness sleeps." "What kind of darkness?" Do-hyun asked. Valara's black eyes grew distant. "The kind that eats light and dreams. It sleeps beyond the rim of known space, but sleep does not last forever." Other aliens who passed by would shake their heads at Do-hyun. They thought he was foolish for listening to an old woman's crazy stories. Even the security guards started to know him. "Kid, you shouldn't encourage her," said Officer Torin, a tall alien with orange skin. "She's harmless, but she's not right in the head." "What if she's not crazy?" Do-hyun asked. "What if she's just old and lonely?" Officer Toran laughed. "Then she's the only person in the galaxy who remembers a war that never happened and a species that never existed." But Do-hyun had started checking the station's computer systems during his free time. In the deepest files, he found old records that mentioned the Nethys. They were listed as an extinct species, gone for over 1,000 years. But the files were marked as legend and unconfirmed. When he told Valara about this, she smiled sadly. "Of course they think we are legends. That is how we planned it. When the Great War ended, the few survivors scattered to the edges of space. We became myths so the galaxy could heal. What war? The first war against the Devourers. We built great machines to keep them sleeping. But machines need guardians, and guardians grow old. She touched his hand with her cold fingers. I am the last guardian, young Do-hyun, and I am dying. Do-hyun felt a chill run down his back. You're not dying. You're just tired. My people live for 3,000 years. I am very old even for us. My light grows dim. She showed him the metal object she always carried. Up close, he could see it was covered in symbols that seemed to move in the light. This is a key, but I am too weak to use it. A key to what? Before Valara could answer, loud alarms began to sound throughout the station. Emergency lights flashed red, and a voice spoke over the communication system in dozens of languages. All civilians report to safe areas immediately. Unknown energy readings detected at Sector 779. All ships prepare for possible evacuation. Do-hyun helped Valara to her feet. Around them, aliens were running and shouting. Fear filled the air like smoke. It begins, Valara whispered. Her gray skin was starting to glow faintly blue. The darkness stirs. After so long, it wakes. What's happening? The edge fleets have found something, or something has found them. She gripped his arm tightly. The old warnings were not stories, young human. They were history waiting to repeat. As they moved toward the safe areas with the crowd, Do-hyun noticed that Valara was moving differently. She stood straighter and her eyes were brighter. Whatever was happening at the edge of space, it was making her more alert. Valara, if you're really the last of your people, and if these stories are true, then what do we do? She looked at him with those deep black eyes. We remember that kindness can change everything. You showed kindness to a forgotten old woman. Now I must decide if I can trust you with the fate of the galaxy. The alarms kept ringing as they joined the crowd of scared aliens heading for safety. Do-hyun didn't know it yet, but his simple act of sharing food with a lonely old woman had just changed his life forever. And somewhere far away, at the very edge of space, something ancient and hungry was waking up after a very long sleep. The emergency lasted for 6 hours. When the alarms finally stopped, everyone learned that 3 exploration ships had vanished near the galaxy's edge. They had been investigating strange energy readings and then suddenly disappeared. No distress calls, no debris, nothing. Do-hyun found Valara in the refugee center sitting quietly while chaos happened around them. Families were crying, officials were shouting orders, and news reports played on every screen. But Valara seemed calm, like she had expected this. The Helix expedition, she said when Do-hyun sat beside her. I knew them by their ship names from the reports. Good crews. They were looking in the wrong place, but they were good people. How do you know about the expedition? Because I have been tracking the signs for months. The energy patterns, the gravitational shifts, the way certain stars have been flickering. Valara touched her glowing key again. The Sentinels are trying to wake up, but they need someone to guide them. Sentinels. Great machines hidden throughout the galaxy. They were built to watch and guard against the Devourers, but they have been sleeping for so long that they have forgotten their purpose. Do-hyun looked around the refugee center. Aliens from dozens of species were scared and confused. None of them seemed to know about any ancient machines. If these Sentinels are real, why doesn't anyone else know about them? Because memory dies with time. The survivors of the First War decided to hide the truth. They thought if people forgot about the Devourers might stay asleep forever. Valara's blue glow was brighter now. They were wrong. Over the next few days, more ships disappeared. The news report said they were investigating spatial anomalies and unidentified energy sources. But Do-hyun noticed something the reporters didn't mention. All the missing ships had been near locations that matched places Valara had described in her stories. Do-hyun started spending his research time differently. Instead of studying regular alien biology, he searched through the oldest files in the station's computer system. Deep in the historical archives, he found fragments of stories that sounded familiar. There were myths about star guardians from the Altarian culture. The Centauri had legends of sleeping giants that protected space. The Vegan stories mentioned watchers in the void who kept ancient evils locked away. Different names, different languages, but the same basic story. Professor Taemin was Do-hyun's teacher and mentor. He was a serious man who had spent 40 years studying alien cultures. When Do-hyun brought him copies of these old stories, the professor was not impressed. Mythology is common throughout the galaxy, Professor Taemin said. adjusting his glasses. Every species has creation stories and tales of ancient heroes. This doesn't make them true. But what if they're not myths? What if they're history? Then where is the evidence? If there was a galactic war involving giant machines, we would have found traces, archaeological sites, wreckage, something. Do-hyun thought about this. What if the evidence was hidden on purpose? By whom? By the winners. The same people who built the machines. Professor Taemin sighed. Do-hyun, I know you've been talking to that old Nethys woman. Everyone knows. But you can't let her stories influence your scientific thinking. The Nethys are supposed to be extinct. They are extinct. She's probably a hybrid, or from a related species. Mental illness is common in elderly aliens who have lived too long. But that evening, when Do-hyun visited Valara, she was different again. Her skin was glowing brighter and she was writing symbols in the dirt with her finger. The symbols looked like the ones on her metal key. The network is stirring, she said without looking up. More sentinels are trying to wake up, but they're confused. They need proper activation codes. What kind of codes? Mathematical sequences based on galactic rotation patterns. Star positions that change over thousands of years. The codes I carry are old, but they should still work. She finished drawing a complex symbol. The problem is that I'm not strong enough anymore to reach the primary node. Where is the primary node? Hidden inside an asteroid field in the neutral zone. The coordinates are in my memory, but the journey would kill me. Valara stood up slowly. Unless someone helps me? Do-hyun felt his heart racing. You want me to help you? I want you to understand that the choice may not be yours to make. If the Devourers wake up completely, they will consume everything. Every world, every species, every star. The galaxy will become empty darkness. More news came the next day. An entire star system had gone quiet. The Kellian system, home to 6 billion Andorians, was no longer responding to communication attempts. Long-range sensors showed that all the planets were still there, but they were completely dark. No lights, no energy signatures, no signs of life. The Galactic Council called an emergency session. Do-hyun watched the debates on public screens throughout the station. Representatives from hundreds of worlds were arguing about what to do. Some wanted to send military fleets to investigate. Others wanted to evacuate border systems. A few suggested that this was just a technical problem with the communication networks. None of them mentioned ancient guardians or sleeping machines. They don't remember because they chose not to remember. Valara said when Do-hyun told her about the debates. After the First War, the leaders decided that fear was more dangerous than ignorance. They thought their children would be happier not knowing about the darkness beyond the rim. But now the darkness is coming back. It never left. It was just waiting. That night, Do-hyun couldn't sleep. He kept thinking about everything Valara had told him. The story seemed impossible, but the disappearing ships and dead star systems were real. Something was happening at the edge of the galaxy, and the government's explanations didn't make sense. He got up and went to the research center's main computer. Using his student access codes, he dug deeper into the historical files. In the deepest, oldest archives, he found something interesting. There were scientific surveys from 300 years ago that mentioned unusual metallic structures inside certain asteroids. The surveys had been classified and then forgotten. But the asteroid locations matched some of the places Valara had described as sentinel hiding spots. Do-hyun copied the files to his personal storage device. When he showed them to Valara the next morning, her eyes went wide. These are real survey reports? From the Terran Deep Space Survey in 27-22. They found artificial structures in 17 different asteroid fields. But the investigation was stopped and classified. Because someone in the government still knew the truth, they found the sleeping sentinels but decided to leave them alone. Valara touched the files gently. This proves I am not crazy. I never thought you were crazy, but others do. Including your Professor Taemin. She looked at him seriously. Do-hyun, I need you to understand something. The activation process is dangerous. It requires someone to bond directly with the Sentinel Network's central computer. The bonding process was designed for Nethys physiology. What happens if a non-Nethys tries to bond with it? The neural feedback would kill them instantly. Do-hyun felt cold. Then how can I help you? I don't know yet. But humans are different. You survive things that should kill you. You adapt to environments that destroy other species. Maybe your people can do something mine cannot. Before Do-hyun could ask what she meant, more alarms started ringing throughout the station. This time, the emergency was bigger. Two more star systems had gone dark, and refugee ships were starting to arrive from the outer regions. As Do-hyun watched the scared aliens streaming into the station, he realized that Valara's impossible stories were becoming terrifying reality, and somehow he was going to have to help her save a galaxy that didn't even believe it was in danger. The galaxy was falling apart piece by piece. Every day brought worse news. The Kellyan system wasn't just dark, it was gone. Long-range telescopes showed empty space where 6 planets used to orbit their star. Not destroyed, not exploded, just missing. The star itself was dimming, as if something was draining its light. Refugee ships arrived at Nexus Station in growing numbers. The aliens who escaped the Edge systems all told similar stories. First, their communications would fail. Then their power systems would start acting strange. Finally, they would see darkness moving between the stars. Not empty space, but actual moving shadows that seemed to eat light itself. Do-hyun found Valara collapsed behind the food stalls one morning. Her blue glow was almost gone and she could barely stand. He carried her to the medical center, but the doctors couldn't help her. Her biology is too different, Dr. Park explained. She's dying of old age and there's nothing we can do to stop it. How long does she have? Days, maybe hours. I'm sorry. Do-hyun sat by Valara's bed in the medical center. She was unconscious most of the time now, but sometimes she would wake up and speak in her musical language. During one of these moments, she grabbed his hand with surprising strength. The coordinates, she whispered in basic Galactic. I must give you the coordinates. Rest. Don't worry about that now. No time left. Her black eyes focused on his face. The primary sentinel node is hidden in the Korath asteroid field, sector 3947G. But the path through the asteroids is dangerous. Many ships have been lost there. Valara, I'm just a student. I can't fly a ship through an asteroid field. Then you must convince others to help. The activation key is here. She pressed the metal object into his hands. But remember, only someone with Nethys blood can use it safely. When I die, the knowledge dies with me. You're not going to die. She smiled weakly. Death comes for all guardians eventually. The question is whether we complete our duty first. Before Do-hyun could answer, emergency sirens began blaring throughout the station. This time the announcement was different. Instead of the usual calm voice, Admiral Soo-jin herself spoke over the communication system. All civilians prepare for immediate evacuation. We have confirmed hostile contact with unknown entities at the edge of known space. Multiple fleets have been lost. This is not a drill. Do-hyun looked out the medical center window and saw military ships arriving at the station. Huge battleships with weapons that could crack planets. But somehow he didn't think even those massive guns would be enough. Go, Valara whispered. Find the Admiral. Tell her what I have told you. She won't believe me. Then show her the key. Show her the coordinates. Tell her that the Nethys built the only weapons that can stop the Devourers. Do-hyun ran through the station's corridors, pushing past panicking civilians and rushing military personnel. The command center was sealed off by guards, but he convinced them to let him speak to someone in charge. Commander Yi-jun was a tired-looking man with gray hair and worried eyes. He listened to Do-hyun's story with growing disbelief. Son, I understand you're scared, but this isn't the time for fairy tales. We're dealing with a real military threat. What kind of threat? What did your scouts find? Commander Yi-jun hesitated. Something we don't understand. Ships that phase in and out of normal space. Weapons that drain energy from our shields instead of causing damage. And they're moving toward populated systems. How fast are they moving? At current speed, they'll reach the core worlds in 6 weeks. We're evacuating the outer colonies and preparing defensive positions. Do-hyun pulled out Valara's key and placed it on the commander's desk. The metal object began to glow softly in the artificial light. This is a Nethys activation key for something called the Sentinel Network. Ancient defense systems hidden throughout the galaxy. And you learned this from a dying alien woman who claims to be from an extinct species. Yes. Commander Yi-jun picked up the key and examined it. The metal is unlike anything in our databases. And these symbols... He called up a computer screen. They match some markings we found on derelict structures in deep space. Structures we couldn't identify. Will you at least tell Admiral Soo-jin? I'll mention it in my report. But right now we have more pressing concerns. That evening, Do-hyun returned to the medical center to find Valara awake and sitting up in bed. She looked terrible, but her eyes were bright. The Devourers have revealed themselves, she said. I can feel them moving through space, consuming light and matter as they travel. The military is preparing to fight them. With what weapons? The Devourers exist partially outside normal spacetime. Conventional energy weapons pass through them without causing damage. Kinetic weapons are absorbed and converted into food for their hunger. Then how did your people stop them before? We didn't stop them. We contained them. The Sentinel network creates barriers made of crystallized spacetime. It doesn't destroy the Devourers, but it forces them back into the void beyond the galaxy's edge. Do-hyun sat down heavily in the chair beside her bed, and now the network is broken. Not broken. Sleeping. It can be awakened, but someone must bond with the central computer and provide conscious guidance. The network is too complex to operate automatically. And you're the only one who can do the bonding. Valara was quiet for a long moment. There might be another way. Your species is remarkably adaptable. Humans have survived in environments that should have killed you. You've developed technologies that other species said were impossible. What are you suggesting? That perhaps a human could survive the bonding process, where other species would die instantly. You said earlier that it would kill anyone who isn't Nethys. I said the neural feedback would be lethal to non-Nethys physiology, but humans have surprised us before. Your brains work differently than ours. You might be able to adapt. Do-hyun felt a cold fear settle in his stomach. Might? The odds are not good. Perhaps 1 chance in 100 of survival, but if you don't try, the odds of galactic survival are 0. Before he could respond, the lights in the medical center flickered and went out. Emergency power kicked in a moment later, but the normal lighting stayed dark. Over the communication system, Admiral Sujin's voice rang out with barely controlled panic. All personnel to battle stations. Long-range sensors have detected the hostile fleet. They'll reach our position in 72 hours. All civilian evacuation ships launch immediately. Through the window, Do-hyun could see people running in the corridors. Ships were launching from the docking bays in streams of light. The great evacuation had begun. It's too late, Valara whispered. They're moving too fast. The network needed weeks to activate properly, and now we have only days. There has to be something we can do. There is one possibility. If we can reach the primary node and begin the activation process, even a partial awakening of the network might be enough to slow the Devourers down. Buy time for the evacuations. And if the bonding process kills me? Valara met his eyes. Then you die knowing you tried to save everyone else. But if you don't try, everyone dies anyway. Do-hyun looked out at the chaos in the corridor. Families were saying goodbye. Children were crying. In 72 hours, the ancient darkness would reach Nexus Station, and there was nowhere left to run. He turned back to Valara and nodded. Tell me what I need to do. Getting Admiral Sujin to listen was harder than fighting aliens. Do-hyun stood in the command center with Valara, who was barely able to stand even with his support. Around them, officers were shouting orders and updating tactical displays. The Devourer fleet was 60 hours away and closing fast. Admiral, I need 5 minutes of your time, Do-hyun said. Admiral Sujin was a tall woman with sharp eyes and gray hair tied back in a military knot. She looked at Do-hyun like he was completely insane. Son, I'm trying to coordinate the evacuation of 30 million civilians. Unless you have a secret weapon, get out of my command center. Actually, I do have a secret weapon. Valara stepped forward and placed her glowing key on the Admiral's tactical table. Immediately, the key began to pulse with blue light, and strange symbols appeared on the table's surface. What is that thing? Admiral Sujin asked. A control key for the Sentinel network, Valara said in her musical voice. Ancient defense systems built to contain the Devourers. They are hidden throughout the galaxy, waiting to be awakened. Ma'am? Commander Yijun interrupted. This is the device I mentioned in my report. Our analyst confirmed that the metal is artificial, but unlike any known technology. Admiral Sujin picked up the key and examined it. Let's say this is real. Let's say there are ancient weapons hidden somewhere in space. How do we activate them? The primary control node is located in the Korath asteroid field, Valara explained. But the activation process requires someone to bond directly with the network's central computer. It was designed for my people, the Nethys, and you're the last of your people. Yes, but I am dying and too weak to complete the bonding process. The neural feedback would kill me before the connection stabilized. Admiral Sujin looked at the tactical displays showing the approaching Devourer fleet. Ships had been disappearing for weeks as the enemy advanced toward the core systems. Every conventional weapon had failed. "What exactly are we fighting?" she asked. "Entities that exist partially outside normal space-time," Valara said. "They consume energy and matter to grow stronger. Your weapons cannot harm them because they phase between dimensions. Only the Sentinel network can force them back into the void." "Ma'am," Officer Jiwan said from a nearby console, "we're getting reports from the forward scouts. The hostiles just consumed the entire Vanguard battle group. 50 ships gone in minutes." Admiral Sujin closed her eyes for a moment. "How long to reach this asteroid field?" 18 hours in a fast courier ship, Do-hyun said. "But we'd need a small team. The asteroid field is dangerous to navigate." "And then what?" "You said this bonding process was designed for her species." Do-hyun took a deep breath. "I volunteer to attempt the bonding." "It will kill you," Valara said quietly. "Maybe, but I have to try." Admiral Sujin stared at him. "You're willing to die for a galaxy that isn't even your home? Earth is part of this galaxy. And besides, someone has to try." For a long moment, the command center was quiet except for the sound of computer systems and distant alarms. Finally, Admiral Sujin nodded. "Commander Yi-jun, prepare the courier ship Swift Arrow. Full medical team, navigation specialists, and military escort." "Yes, ma'am, and get me Professor Taemin. If we're going to risk a student's life on an insane plan, I want his teacher there to monitor the process." 6 hours later, Do-hyun was aboard the Swift Arrow with a small crew. Besides himself and Valara, there was Commander Yi-jun, Officer Jiwan, Professor Taemin, Dr. Park, and 2 navigation specialists. The ship was fast and well-armed, but it felt very small compared to the enormous task ahead. The journey to the Korath asteroid field took them through empty space that should have been full of ships. Trade routes that had been busy for centuries were now silent and dark. The Devourers had consumed everything in their path. "Long-range sensors are picking up the edge of the asteroid field," Officer Jiwan reported from the pilot's seat. "It's bigger than the charts indicated. These asteroids are huge." Through the ship's windows, Do-hyun could see the asteroid field stretching in all directions. Some of the asteroids were as large as moons, spinning slowly in the darkness. Finding anything hidden inside this maze would be nearly impossible. "The primary node is located inside the largest asteroid at the field's center," Valara said. She was connected to the ship's medical systems now, too weak to sit up without support. "But the path through the field is dangerous. Many ships have been lost here." "Why?" Commander Yi-jun asked. "Because the asteroids are not natural. They were placed here deliberately to hide and protect the Sentinel node. Some of them contain automated defense systems." As if to prove her point, the ship's sensors detected movement among the asteroids. Ancient weapon systems dormant for centuries were starting to wake up. Energy readings spiked as targeting systems locked onto the Swift Arrow. "Evasive maneuvers," Commander Yi-jun ordered. "Jiwan, get us through this maze." Officer Jiwan was an excellent pilot, but navigating the asteroid field was like flying through a 3-dimensional puzzle while being shot at. Ancient laser batteries fired bursts of energy that could vaporize a battleship. Missile systems launched seekers that had been waiting 1,000 years to find targets. "The defenses are activating because they sense the key," Valara explained as the ship dodged between spinning asteroids. "They know someone is coming to wake up the network. Can you shut them down?" "Not until we reach the primary node. The key only works at the central control point." It took 4 hours to reach the center of the asteroid field. The largest asteroid was the size of a small planet, with deep canyons and artificial structures built into its surface. As they approached, massive doors began to open in the asteroid's crust, revealing docking bays that had been sealed for centuries. "The node recognizes the key," Valara said. "It's letting us inside." The Swift Arrow landed in a docking bay that was larger than most space stations. The walls were covered with the same glowing symbols that appeared on Valara's key. As soon as they powered down the ship's engines, the symbols began to pulse in sequence like a heartbeat. "The network is trying to wake up," Valara explained. "But it needs conscious guidance to complete the process." They helped her out of the ship and into corridors that seemed to stretch forever. The walls were made of crystal and metal, and everything glowed with soft blue light. Professor Taemin was recording everything with his instruments. "This technology is thousands of years ahead of anything we understand," he said in amazement. "The power systems alone are impossible by our current understanding of physics." At the center of the asteroid, they found the control room. It was a vast chamber filled with crystalline structures that reached from floor to ceiling. At the center was a throne-like chair surrounded by floating displays showing the entire galaxy. "This is where the bonding takes place," Valara said. "The person who sits in that chair becomes connected to every sentinel in the galaxy. They can see through the network's sensors, control its weapons, and coordinate its defenses. And it will kill anyone who isn't Nethys," Professor Taemin said. "The neural feedback is designed for our brain structure. Other species lack the proper neural pathways to handle the data flow." Do-hyun walked up to the chair and placed his hand on its surface. Immediately, symbols began glowing along his arm, and he could feel something trying to connect to his mind. "It's not painful," he said, surprised. "It feels like someone trying to talk to me in a language I don't understand." "That's the network attempting to establish a connection," Valara explained. "If you sit in the chair and activate the key, the connection will become complete. But the data flow will increase by a factor of millions. Will it definitely kill me? I don't know. No non-Nethys has ever tried." Do-hyun looked around at his companions. Professor Taemin looked worried but proud. Dr. Park was monitoring his vital signs. Commander Yi-jun and Officer Ji-won were checking their communications with the outside galaxy. "Sir," Officer Ji-won said, "I'm getting reports from Nexus Station. The Devourer fleet has arrived. They're beginning their attack." On the floating displays around the chair, Do-hyun could see images from across the galaxy. The Devourers looked like moving shadows with too many arms and eyes that glowed with hungry light. They flowed around space stations and planets like living darkness, consuming everything they touched. "How long do we have?" he asked. "Hours at most," Commander Yi-jun said. "The station's defenses won't hold for long." Do-hyun sat down in the chair and placed Valara's key in a slot on the armrest. Immediately, the entire chamber filled with light, and he could feel the network trying to connect to his mind. "Do-hyun," Valara said weakly, "remember that humans are survivors. You adapt to impossible situations. Trust in that." He nodded and pressed the activation button. The universe exploded into his consciousness. Pain like lightning struck through Do-hyun's skull as the Sentinel network connected to his mind. Information flooded his consciousness. The positions of 10,000 hidden weapon platforms, the energy levels of dormant power systems, the locations of every devourer in the galaxy. It was too much for any human brain to process. He screamed and tried to pull away from the chair, but crystalline cables had emerged from the armrests and wrapped around his arms. The bonding process had begun and there was no way to stop it. "His neural activity is off the charts," Dr. Park shouted over the sound of alarms. "His brain is trying to process more information than should be possible. Can we disconnect him?" Professor Taemin asked. "Not without killing him," Valara said weakly. "The bonding process must complete or the shock will stop his heart." Do-hyun felt like his head was splitting apart. Through the pain, he could see flashes of images from across the galaxy. Nexus Station was under attack, its shields failing as the Devourers drained power from the defense systems. Admiral Sujin's fleet was firing uselessly at enemies that absorbed their energy weapons and grew stronger. But something else was happening. Deep in his mind, Do-hyun could feel the network trying to organize itself. The Sentinel systems had been asleep for so long that they had forgotten how to work together. They needed conscious guidance, someone to coordinate their awakening. "Fight through the pain," he whispered to himself. "People are dying. You have to fight through the pain." Slowly, carefully, Do-hyun began to sort through the flood of information. He focused on one thing at a time. First the weapon platforms near Nexus Station, then the power systems that fed them, then the targeting computers that would aim them at the Devourers. "Something's happening," Officer Ji-won reported from her console. "Energy readings are spiking throughout this sector of space." Through the network's sensors, Do-hyun could see the hidden sentinels beginning to wake up. Weapon platforms disguised as asteroids were powering their systems. Defense stations hidden inside gas giants were raising their shields. Battle stations camouflaged as space debris were charging their quantum cannons. But the Devourers were moving too fast. Even with the Sentinels awakening, they were still hours away from full power. The core worlds would be consumed before the network came online, unless he could find another way. Do-hyun reached deeper into the network's memory systems, searching for information about the Devourers. What he found terrified him. These creatures had consumed entire galaxies in the distant past. They moved between dimensions, feeding on light and matter and life itself. The only reason they had been contained before was because the Nethys had tricked them into a trap. They're not just hungry, Do-hyun gasped, speaking through the neural link. They're intelligent. They learn from every battle, adapt to every weapon. That's why conventional forces can't stop them. Then how do we fight them? Commander Yi-jun asked. We don't fight them. We contain them. The Sentinels don't destroy the Devourers. They create barriers of crystallized space-time that force them back into the void between dimensions. But creating those barriers required perfect coordination between thousands of weapon platforms spread across the galaxy. The network needed someone to guide every movement, every decision, every targeting solution. It was impossible for one mind to control, except maybe a human mind. Do-hyun felt something changing in his neural patterns. The flood of information was starting to make sense. His brain was adapting, creating new pathways to handle the impossible data flow. It hurt worse than anything he had ever experienced, but he was surviving. Vital signs are stabilizing, Dr. Park reported in amazement. His neural activity is still extreme, but it's becoming organized. His brain is actually rewiring itself to handle the network's requirements. Through the Sentinel sensors, Do-hyun could see the battle at Nexus Station. The Devourers were flowing around the station like liquid shadow, draining power from the shields. Admiral Soo-jin's ships were firing desperately, but their weapons passed harmlessly through the enemy. Do-hyun reached out through the network and activated the nearest Sentinel platforms. Ancient weapon systems that had been hidden in the asteroid belt suddenly came online, their quantum cannons charging with enough power to crack planets. But these weren't normal weapons. Instead of firing energy or matter, the Sentinel cannons fired crystallized space-time itself. When the quantum bolts hit the Devourers, they didn't cause damage. They forced the creatures back into normal space where conventional weapons could affect them. Admiral Soo-jin, Do-hyun spoke through the network's communication system, his voice echoing in the command centers of every ship in the galaxy. This is Do-hyun. Target the Devourers now while they're solid. The human fleet opened fire immediately. This time their weapons found their marks. The Devourers, forced into normal space-time by the Sentinel platforms, began to take damage. Some were destroyed, others retreated deeper into the shadow dimensions, but there were too many of them, and more were coming from the void beyond the galaxy's edge. Do-hyun could see them through the network's long-range sensors, a vast fleet of hungry darkness stretching across light years of space. I need more power, Do-hyun said. The Sentinels throughout the galaxy, I need them all online now. That will take hours, Valara said weakly. The systems have been dormant for too long. They need time to charge. We don't have time. Do-hyun made a decision that would change him forever. Instead of waiting for the distant Sentinels to wake up slowly, he pushed his consciousness directly into their systems. Using the network's quantum communication links, he forced his awareness into weapon platforms scattered across 100,000 light-years of space. The neural feedback was incredible. His human brain was trying to exist in 10,000 places at once, controlling systems that required the processing power of entire civilizations. But somehow impossibly he held on. Neural activity is beyond measurement, Dr. Park whispered. He should be dead. No biological brain can handle this kind of processing load. Humans are different, Valara said with a weak smile. They survive impossible things. Across the galaxy, the Sentinel network came alive. Weapon platforms hidden in dead star systems powered up instantly. Battle stations disguised as moons began moving into combat positions. Defense grids that had been invisible for millennia suddenly blazed with energy signatures. The Devourers found themselves facing weapons they had never encountered before. Instead of energy beams they could absorb or kinetic projectiles they could phase through, the Sentinels fired reality itself. Quantum barriers appeared around entire star systems, trapping the Devourers in normal space where conventional fleets could attack them. Do-hyun coordinated it all. Through the network, he could see every battle, control every weapon, direct every defense. The human fleets following his guidance began winning victories that should have been impossible. Devourer forces that had seemed unstoppable were being pushed back toward the galaxy's edge. But the effort was destroying his body. Even with his brain's incredible adaptation, the strain of controlling a galaxy-spanning network was beyond what any organic being could endure. Do-hyun, Professor Taemin said urgently, your vital signs are failing. You have to reduce the neural load. Can't stop now, Do-hyun gasped. Almost have them contained. Through the network, he could see the main Devourer fleet trying to retreat into the void between dimensions. But this time he was ready for them. Sentinel platforms at the galaxy's edge activated massive barrier generators, creating walls of crystallized space-time that blocked the Devourer's escape routes. The ancient enemies found themselves trapped inside the galaxy with nowhere to run. Human and alien fleets coordinated by the Sentinel network began the final attack. This time, when the Devourers tried to phase into shadow dimensions, they found quantum barriers waiting for them. The battle lasted 6 hours. When it was over, the Devourer fleet had been completely destroyed or forced back into the deep void beyond the galaxy's edge. The barriers would hold them there for thousands of years, maybe forever, but the victory came at a price. Do-hyun's body was failing. The neural connection to the Sentinel network had changed him at the cellular level. Biomechanical systems had grown throughout his nervous system, connecting his brain directly to quantum communication links. He was no longer completely human. The bonding process is permanent, Valara explained as the medical team worked to stabilize his condition. You are now part of the network, the galaxy's new guardian. Will I die? Do-hyun asked weakly. No, but you will never be the same. The network will keep your body alive indefinitely, but you must remain connected to guide and protect the Sentinels. That doesn't sound so bad. Valara smiled and closed her eyes for the last time. The galaxy is safe because a human boy showed kindness to a lonely old woman. I think that is a good way for the story to end. When the news of victory reached the core worlds, the celebration lasted for weeks. The Galactic Council established new laws recognizing humanity's role as guardians of the ancient defense network. Earth became a founding member of the Inner Council, with privileges and responsibilities that reflected their species' unique contribution to galactic security. Do-hyun remained in the Asteroid Control Center, connected permanently to